Assalamu alaikum students. Today we are going to continue with the same topic, Pakistan Zindabad. In previous lecture, I told you about Quaid-e-Azam's health, that it was declining, and at the same time doctors were advising him to take rest. Quaid-e-Azam refused to take rest and to take care of himself. He decided to work for the mission of Pakistan. And with his efforts, he started a newspaper called Dawn, and not only that, he was successful in gathering all the Muslims under one mission, and that is to make Pakistan happen. For the same purpose, to come down to one agreement with Hindus, Jinnah and Quaid-e-Azam tried to meet and to settle things down, but it never worked. Gandhi and Jinnah met for 3 weeks, and it is also called the three roundtable conferences between Gandhi and Quaid-e-Azam as well, of talks in a last attempt to reach an agreement. Jinnah said that India must be two nations, not one. Gandhi replied that this would mean ruin for all India. There could be no agreement between two men so different. Jinnah was as usual very severe and firm. Faultlessly dressed, Gandhi wore his familiar white dhoti and sat on the floor. The one was a Muslim first and last, and the other Hindu to his fingertips. Jinnah might have said then what he once said of the Hindus and Muslims: we are different creatures. There is nothing in life that joins us together. So at this particular time, when Congress was after the mission to throw the Britishers out and to have all of the subcontinent for themselves, the Jinnah has different plan. The Muslim League and Jinnah wanted Britishers out of subcontinent, but they want two nations for Hindu and Muslim separately so that they could live according to the way they want to live. Gandhi was of this perspective, or he thinks that if we divide subcontinent into two parts, it will destroy all of the India. But Quaid-e-Azam has this greater vision in his mind. Maybe before this all, that before the Britishers could have arrived in subcontinent, everyone was living peacefully under the Mughal rulers. But at that time, they were not so much aware of their differences. But when the Britishers arrived in subcontinent, this feeling of the difference, that we are different from each other, was widened. It was realized by each and every person that I am Hindu or that person is Muslim. So, and the differences started to become more grave. So when they were struggling for Pakistan, or when they were struggling to have the Britishers out, at that particular time, Muslims and Hindus, even if they were going for one mission like throwing the Britishers out, they have different missions in their mind for themselves. Hindus wanted one nation only, and that they could have the opportunity after a very long time to rule and have the Muslims under them. And Muslims don't want to be living under the superior power of Hindus because they were in majority. So they were fighting for their own good, that they want to live peacefully in their own country. Now, coming from these two societies, the two leaders were through and through what they were. Like Quaid-e-Azam was totally Muslim from first and last, and he dressed so differently from Gandhi even. He wore sherwani and suit. But Gandhi only wore dhoti, and he was Hindu till fingertips. The two people who are so different from each other, not in physical appearance but also in their approach towards the situation, they can't decide or come down to one agreement. And it was same when he said Quaid-e-Azam once that we are different creatures. At that particular time, he could have said or thought that we are different creatures, and then there is no point of living us together. After the war came the time for the final settlement. This is the war which is the reference for the world war which was going on in Europe. or European countries, among European countries. When several more meetings and discussions had failed to bring about agreement, Britain declared that she was going to give full self government to the people of India and leave the country by June 1948. So, when the settlement and the agreement was not happening, so Britain decided that they will give full authority to India and they will leave by June 1948. And now look at this picture. It tells that how they actually having meeting and they were not coming down to the agreement. It is not shown in the picture, but here we can see that there is a Hindu and Muslim and a Britisher sitting on one table. So they were all together, but they were not coming down to one decision that what should be done. Lord Mountbatten was sent to India as the last viceroy with orders to find a way of handing over the government. Now the Britishers also want to leave and they want the things to be done the way it should be done. So they sent Lord Mountbatten for the decision as a decision taker to subcontinent. This was in March 1947, but already the country was on the verge of civil war. So at that particular time, the subcontinent was on civil war. They don't want Britishers to stay any more long. The government was divided and powerless. As I told you that the Muslim League was working towards their mission and Congress in a different direction, so there was a division and the whole government was, has got powerless and the people have started to attack and they were going for the civil war. And the British officers were eager to leave a country where they were no longer wanted. Mountbatten quickly decided that India must be divided into two states, and at once he announced that the British leave by August 15, 1947. So, a year before and months earlier, they decided to leave on August 15 and hand over their powers to the new states of Pakistan and India. The provinces that the Muslim claim must decide at once whether they wish to join Pakistan or India. There must be no more delay. Congress and the Muslim League both agreed to these plans. For Jinnah, it was a great victory. So, Mountbatten decided that they won't stay there for one more year. They decided to leave by 15th August and hand over the subcontinent to Muslims and Hindus separately. He decided to divide it. And he said that in such a short time they should decide that which Muslim areas should be annexed together and to make Pakistan and which should be left for India. Now it was a great victory for Jinnah. This is what they were have this mission working for, that they want Pakistan to be separate from India. Sindh, the northwest frontier province, Balochistan, West Punjab, Sylhet, and East Bengal were included in Pakistan. This made a smaller state that League had asked for. Some 40 million Muslims were left in India, but now at last it could be said that most of the Indian Muslims had a homeland of their own. The Qais led his people through the terrible first year of their history. When the country was divided, millions of people crossed the new borders of the state. 6.5 million leaving India and 5.5 million Hindus Pakistan. The sight of these homeless people moved Jinnah to tears. Now, these are the areas given Sindh northwest frontier. They annexed this and made Pakistan the Pakistan we have today. Even though League asked for more of the territory in the subcontinent, but because of the being landlocked by the Indian territory or for some different reasons, these areas were annexed together to make Pakistan. And 40 million people, Muslims, were still left in the territory of India, but nothing could be done for them because they are in between of the subcontinent or the areas where they can't annex it to Pakistan. You already know about the West Pakistan and East Pakistan story, and now we have Bangladesh over there. It was quite impossible to rule two parts of a continent which are so separate. And similar situation was like that. There were areas within the Indian territory where there were Muslim majority, and that 40 million Muslims were left in India. but it could be said that the greater number got their own nation. Now, what actually happened at the time of partition, when it was considered to be the terrible first year of their history, because at that time in 1947 and from August 1947 and before and after that, the people were actually migrating from one place to another, and because of this migration there were lots of killing, which we have discussed before. There were threats, and there were killings, there were murders, there were massacres, and that actually brought tears to the eyes of Jinnah, who knew that it would be the part of the independence. These are the pictures which will tell you that this is what was going on at that particular time. Look at the railway carriage, that it was overloaded, and people want to go inside because they must be knowing that this is the last train to move towards Pakistan or India. The people who decided to take the land route, they were also in danger, because of course they were killed and massacres were happening on the way. So this is what the whole true picture was of that particular time in 1947. Once more, angry crowds murdered and stole and burned. About 500,000 Muslims were killed or carried away as prisoners. All this killing and destruction, Jinnah, who always hated violence and cruelty, he begged for and friendship with his former enemies. Some nations have killed millions of each other, he once said, and yet an enemy of today is a friend of tomorrow. The Qaid was over 70, worn out with his lifetime of struggle and by his growing illness. The last year of his life was made sad by the fate of Kashmir, the K in Pakistan. So at that particular time, when it was totally decided that Pakistan and India has been declared, so once again this wave of angry crowds murdered and stole and burned each other. The Hindu community did it with Muslims, and Muslims to Hindus, and Sikh were also involved. So was the big picture which actually happened at the time. We got the nations, but this is the reality which also existed at that time. And till today we can have a story from the elderlies, that how they actually move from one place to another and what they have lost during the migration process. Millions of Muslims were killed or carried away as prisoners. So this was the violence and cruelty which saddened Jinnah a lot. He begged for the friendship with this enemy, that means he begged friendship with the Hindus. And he said that some nations have killed millions of each other, he said, but yet the next day they are also friends, and they're the friends of tomorrow. He hoped that it could be made possible. And maybe if he could have lived longer, he could have worked towards it, but it never happened. And because of the political reasons in both the countries, it will never happen. The Qaid was over 70. He was now aged man, over 70 years old, and he was worn out with all the struggle and with all this independence phase. And then what happened in those years, that what happened with Kashmir actually was a it took him back. It was a grave thing which actually hurt Qadi Azam a lot, because according to the Pakistan lettering, K was from Kashmir and Kashmir should be given to Pakistan, but at that time Sikh Maharaja sold it to the Hindus, and he forbid any of his people to move to Pakistan or to be annexed with Pakistan. So this was a story of Kashmir which actually saddened, and it was really something, a stab on the back to for Qaid Azam. The news that a Hindu Maharaja was taking his Muslim subjects away from Pakistan, the nation to which they certainly wanted to belong. This is the story of Kashmir, that the Hindu Maharaja, or it is also told that it is Sikh Maharaja, whatever. The Maharaja of the Kashmir at that time actually gave it to Hindus. He sold it to Hindus, and the nation and the people over there wanted to join Pakistan. It was a fearful blow to Qaid Azam. But by now he was too weak and too tired to fight anymore. Now he was done with all the fighting. A dying man. Once again he flew to Karachi, but this time there were no crowds to greet him. And it is the time after the independence that he came back to the Karachi, and at this particular time he was not greeted because he did it very silently. He had always kept the news of his illness to himself. That night he left people and they buried him in the heart of the city where he was born, in the heart of the nation he had made. So after a time of independence, not exactly after the independence he died, later in few months he did. So at one particular time he must have gone to Karachi as well, but at this time he was not greeted by a huge crowd. It is not that nobody was willing to do it, it was because he did it very quietly. He quietly went over there and he died where he was born. So this was the story of Qaid Azam in short in this chapter, Pakistan Zindabad. Now let me briefly explain it clearly. What actually happened is कि कायद अज़म की सेहत काफ़ी ख़राब हो चुकी थी इतनी स्ट्रगल के बाद, लेकिन उनको अपने मिशन पे पूरा पूरा ध्यान था। वो इस चीज़ को समझ रहे थे कि अगर अपनी सेहत पर उन्होंने तवज्जो दी तो शायद वो अपना मिशन पूरा नहीं कर पाएंगे, और उनका मिशन यही था कि पाकिस्तान को बनाना है। तो उन्होंने डॉक्टर्स की भी बात को तरजीह नहीं दी और अपने मिशन पे लगे रहे। उन्होंने एक न्यूज़पेपर भी निकाला डॉन के नाम से, और सारे मुसलमान जो कि सब कॉन्टिनेंट थे उनको मुत्तहद कर दिया एक चीज़ के ऊपर कि उन्होंने पाकिस्तान हासिल करना है। उन्होंने इतना मोटिवेट किया, इतनी तकरीरें की, और मुस्लिम लीग साथ में थी तो उनका इरादा और भी स्ट्रॉन्ग हो चुका था। अब इसी सिलसिले के लिए इन्होंने गांधी से मीटिंग भी की। इनकी 3 कॉन्फ्रेंसेस हुई और तीनों नाकाम हो गई, क्योंकि जो दो लोग एक दूसरे से मिलते ही नहीं हैं, ड्रेसिंग में, हुलिये में और अंदाज में कल्चरली बिल्कुल डिफरेंट है। गांधी पूरे पूरे हिंदू थे, जो कायद आज़म पूरे के पूरे मुसलमान, तो कैसे हो सकता था कि वो दोनों एक नज़रिए के ऊपर इत्तेफाक करते। कायद आज़म ने कहा कि सब कॉन्टिनेंट को, इस खत्ते को 2 हिस्सों में बांट देना चाहिए, लेकिन गांधी का ये ख्याल था कि इससे बहुत बड़ी तबाही होगी। वो उस तबाही की बात कर रहे थे कि जो एट द टाइम ऑफ पार्टीशन खून खराबा और ये सब कुछ होना था। तो जिस पे कायद आज़म का, क्योंकि बहुत दूर तक उन्होंने विज़न उनका था, वो ये समझ चुके थे कि अगर हमने अभी कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ कर लिया तो फिर सारी ज़िंदगी कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ करते रहेंगे। तो वो इस इरादे से बिल्कुल मुत्तफ़िक़ नहीं थे कि एक ही जगह पे रहा जाए, बल्कि वो चाहते थे कि पाकिस्तान अलग कर दिया जाए, इंडिया अलग हो जाए और दोनों कौमें जो हैं अपनी अपने मुल्कों में अपनी आज़ादी से रहें। तो इस मिशन के तहत उन्होंने किया। फिर ब्रिटिशर्स की बात आती है कि ब्रिटिशर्स ने जब देखा कि कोई फ़ैसला नहीं हो पा रहा तो उन्होंने फिर लॉर्ड माउंटबेटन को फ़ैसला करने के लिए भेजा। उनका इरादा था कि 1948 के जून महीने में ये लोग चले जाएंगे सब कॉन्टिनेंट से, लेकिन वहाँ पे वर्ल्ड वॉर छिड़ चुकी थी, यहाँ पे सिविल वॉर बिल्कुल आगाज़ पे थी। तो लॉर्ड माउंटबेटन ने बहुत तेज़ी से फ़ैसला किया और उन्होंने कहा कि हम लोग जो है 15 अगस्त 1947 को ब्रिटिशर्स वहाँ से चले जाएंगे और ये ख़ित्ता जो है 2 हिस्सों में डिवाइड कर दिया जाएगा, मुसलमानों को उनका दिया जाएगा और हिंदुओं को उनका दिया जाएगा। तो उसके लिए उन्होंने कहा कि जो भी आप कर सकते हैं कर लें, जितने मुसलमान एरियाज़ हैं उनको नेक्स कर सकते हैं, वो पूरा पेपर वर्क हो जाना चाहिए। तो इस तरह से कायद आज़म को अपनी कामयाबी मिल गई। वो एक चीज़ जो वो चाहते थे वो पूरी हो गई और वो डॉक्यूमेंट में भी आ गई। उसके बाद जितने खत्ते मिले तो वो उतने कम थे जितना वो चाहते थे। मुस्लिम लीग और कायद आज़म के ये सारे मुसलमानों को इकट्ठा कर लिया जाए पाकिस्तान में, ऐसा हो नहीं सका, क्योंकि ऐसे बहुत सारे मुसलमान के इलाके थे जो लैंड लॉक थे। लैंड लॉक यानी कि चारों तरफ से हिंदू इलाके थे, तो वो उसको पाकिस्तान में शामिल नहीं कर पाए। इसी तरह से 40 मिलियन यानी कि 40 मिलियन मुसलमान इंडिया में ही रह गए, क्योंकि वो वहाँ से उनको पाकिस्तान में नहीं जोड़ा जा सका। तो पाकिस्तान, फिर भी पाकिस्तान में रहने वाले जितने मुसलमान थे उनकी तादाद उससे भी ज़्यादा थी, और अब कहा जा सकता था कि मुसलमानों का अपना एक मुल्क हो गया है। उसके बाद जो थी सिलसिला शुरू हुआ था माइग्रेशन का, यानी कि यहाँ से मुसलमान, यहाँ से हिंदू, पाकिस्तान से हिंदू इंडिया जा रहे थे, वहाँ से मुसलमान यहाँ पे वापस आ रहे थे, और इस सारी कार्रवाई में खून बहुत बहा था, बहुत لوگوں نے پورے پورے ٹرینیں جلا دیں، اور جو پیدل سفر کر رہے تھے ادھر ان کے قتل کر دیے گئے. اس میں سکھ بھی شامل تھے، ہندو بھی تھے، اور مسلمان کی جگہ سے مسلمان بھی تھے. سب ایک دوسرے پہ ٹوٹے پڑے تھے، کیونکہ ایک جو لہر تھی غصے کی اور نفرت کی وہ بھڑک چکی تھی اس ٹائم پہ، جب یہ سٹیمپ لگ گیا تھا کہ پاکستان اور انڈیا دو حصوں میں، یعنی سب کانٹیننٹ دو حصوں میں ہو جائے گا، اور ایک پاکستان اور ایک انڈیا کہلائے گا. اس کے بعد جو ایک غصہ جو دبا ہوا تھا وہ آگ کی طرح نکلا، اور اس کے ساتھ ہی ساتھ جو ہے بہت خون خرابہ ہوا، جس کی وجہ سے قائد اعظم کی جو طبیعت تھی وہ اور بگڑ بھی گئی تھی، اور ان کو بہت دکھ پہنچا تھا. لیکن وہ اس امید سے تھے کہ شاید بعد میں ہم دوست ہی بن جائیں، لیکن یہ اسی وقت کر پاتے اگر وہ کچھ زیادہ عرصہ جی جاتے. لیکن ان کی طبیعت بگڑ چکی تھی، وہ 70 ایئرس کے ہو چکے تھے اور بالکل اپنے مرنے کے اوپر تھے. پھر آخری لمحوں میں تو یہی ہوا کہ کشمیر کا جو مہاراجا تھا، اس نے ہندو مہاراجا تھا، اس نے کشمیر جو ہے وہ انڈیا کو بیچ دیا، اور وہاں کے مسلمانوں کا حق چھین لیا جو پاکستان سے جڑنا چاہتے تھے، جو آج تک اس کی لڑائی چل رہی ہے. یہ چیز جو تھی قائد اعظم کو بہت دکھ دیا. قائد اعظم ایک دم ان کو دھچکا لگا جیسے کہ، لیکن اس وقت تک وہ اتنے کمزور ہو چکے تھے اور بالکل مرنے والی طبیعت ہو چکی تھی کمزوری کے حالت میں، تو وہ لڑائی نہیں لڑ سکے کہ کشمیر کو وہ واپس حاصل کر لیں. اس کے بعد پھر ایک دفعہ انڈیپینڈنس ہو گئی، دو ملک ہو گئے، اور قائد اعظم ادھر کے فرسٹ گورنر جنرل بن گئے. پھر ایک دفعہ وہ کراچی آئے دوبارہ، جیسے شروع ہوا تھا چیپٹر کراچی آنے سے، اور ان کو استقبال ملا تھا ایک ہفتے پہلے آزادی کے. یہ اس کافی عرصے آزادی کے بعد یہ کراچی پھر ایک دفعہ آئے. اس دفعہ کوئی مجمع نہیں تھا کیونکہ یہ خاموشی سے آئے تھے، اور اس رات ان کا انتقال ہو گیا، اور ان کو وہیں پہ دفنایا گیا جہاں ان کی پیدائش ہوئی تھی، اس شہر میں، اسی شہر میں ان کو دفنایا گیا ہے، دیٹ از کراچی. سو دس was the story of Qaid Azam, his struggle, and the making of Pakistan briefly in this chapter, Pakistan Zindabad. This is for today. Thank you.